All right, guys, here we go with the Unit 12 test review. So I wrote down everything I think was important and highlighted what I think might be very important for you to know. So please feel free to add this to what you have already constructed for your review. So remember, the GI system consists of two major things, which are the alimentary canal and the accessory organs. And it's really important to understand, and it makes total sense if you think about when you put food in your mouth, it eventually comes out the other end. There's one big hollow tube there that's all interconnected, which we'll look at in a minute. But you also have some other organs that help um, with the process of digestion and things like that. So we call those the accessory organs, and they have a very important part of the system too. Two major functions of the system, and there are way more than this, but if we can boil it down to the two most important things the system does, is to absorb nutrients into the bloodstream because your body needs those nutrients to survive, and to eliminate the waste products. So everything that you eat isn't going to be used, so we have to get rid of some of the waste as well. Two major types of digestion. We have chemical digestion, which is really enzymes. Enzymes are those little chemicals that break down food to its most basic nutrients that the body can use. So the body can't just take, the corn that you eat and use the corn that you eat. It has to get down to what's in the corn, the vitamins and the minerals. And then those vitamins and minerals and whatever else little chemicals are in your food have to get into your bloodstream to circulate throughout and help your body do its job. We also have mechanical digestion, so your body really can't just take a big piece of bread after you stick it in your mouth, right? It has to get smaller and smaller so that chemical digestion can occur. So mechanical digestion is the physical breakdown into just smaller pieces. There's two major things that happen to provide mechanical digestion, which are mastication, the medical word for chewing that happens in your mouth with your teeth, and then your stomach churns when food's in there. So it's kind of like a clothes washer. It's going spinning around and around to break down the food into smaller parts. So let's focus on the alimentary canal, which is that big long tube that's totally connected from one end to the other. So the buccal cavity or the mouth connects to the pharynx or the throat. The pharynx connects, if we're going down the GI tract, to the esophagus, which connects to the stomach. The stomach will empty into the small intestine. The small intestine enters into the large intestine. We'll talk about this a little bit later, but it is important that you know the parts of the small intestine and the parts of the large intestine as well. So let's focus on the mouth, which again is called the buccal cavity, and we've also learned that it's called the oral cavity, buc meaning cheek. Mechanical and chemical digestion are the big processes that occur in the mouth. So again, functions of the mouth are digestion. So mechanical, again, that mastication or chewing, and then chemical digestion begins when you put food in your mouth, even before really, because the sensation of smelling your food and like anticipating your food releases saliva, and that saliva has amylase, which is an enzyme that breaks down carbohydrates in your food. So there are more enzymes that do multiple things throughout the system, but the first part of chemical digestion begins in the mouth itself. Pretty amazing. The mouth contains some structures like the hard and soft palate. Remember the hard palate, and think about your mouth. The hard part's up in the front, right? The anterior or front portion. It's the bony structure. So it separates like the nasal cavity and the oral cavity. Then if you keep feeling back, eventually that bony structure leaves and it's kind of just a soft thing back there. So the soft palate is the posterior portion of the roof of the mouth. You have the uvula, the hanging ball, in the back of the throat and the back of the soft palate that prevents food from entering up into the nose, the nasopharynx. And you also have salivary glands throughout the mouth. There's three sets of them: the parotid, sublingual, meaning below the tongue, and submandibular, back behind the cheeks, that produce and secrete saliva to help with digestion. The esophagus comes next. So esophagus is that long hollow tube connecting the pharynx to the stomach. The important thing here is peristalsis will begin. So when you swallow, you can control swallowing, but after that we have movement happening of food, and we're not controlling that movement. So it's a smooth muscle, involuntary motion. Peristalsis is that's this rhythmic wave-like motion that's forcing food down through the system. So it's important to not only know that what begins as peristalsis, but make sure you understand the definition of peristalsis too. The stomach comes next. And big major functions of the stomach really is digestion occurs in the stomach. There's mechanical and chemical digestion both happening. Again, mechanical digestion in the stomach is the churning motion. Chemical digestion, there's all sorts of different enzymes there to break down all sorts of different nutrients in the foods that you eat. The stomach contains rugae. Remember the folds, and the folds are important when you have no food in your stomach. You're going to have more folds, and then as you fill your stomach, you'll see less folds because the stomach's expanding. There are 2 sphincter muscles in the stomach. Sphincters, remember again, are those donut or ring-shaped muscles that can open and close. Found all over the body, but again, 2 in your stomach. So the 2 in the stomach are called the cardiac sphincter or the lower esophageal sphincter. That's the one at the top, which is at the base of the esophagus near the heart. That prevents food from going back up into the esophagus. And remember, we don't want stuff back up into the esophagus because stomach contents are acidic and the esophagus can't handle that acid. We also have a second sphincter in the stomach called the pyloric sphincter. It's at the bottom. So when the pyloric sphincter is closed, food remains in the stomach to be digested. When it's open, it's going to allow the passage of contents from the stomach to go down into the small intestine and continue the journey. The small intestine has 2 major functions. The really big, important one that I kind of harped on in the PowerPoint was to absorb nutrients. And remember, that's accomplished because we have, which we're going to talk down below about, is there's a rich supply of capillaries, those teeny tiny blood vessels. And remember when we did cardiac system, capillaries are really important because they allow things in and out. They're very thin walls. So the capillaries kind of line the walls of the small intestine, so nutrients can pass from the walls of the small intestine into the bloodstream to be transported through the body where they can be used. The other thing that happens in the small intestine is more chemical digestion. There's a lot of chemical digestion that still occurs through the action of enzymes here. So we kind of already covered how that nutrient absorption occurs into the capillaries. Villi are also important in how nutrient absorption occurs. The villi, remember, are those tiny little microscopic finger-like projections that line the entire internal circumference of the small intestine. And all that does is it creates more surface area for absorption to occur. Remember, absorption of nutrients is that major function of the small intestine. So we have a lot of capillaries running through the villi, lots of space to be able to pick up the nutrients. I do want you to know, it's going to be important to know all the sections of both the small and the large intestine in order. So the small intestine, after the stomach, food enters the small intestine, but it enters the duodenum of the small intestine. The middle portion is the jejunum, and then the ileum is the final portion of the small intestine. I spelled that wrong. The large intestine comes next. So after we leave the ileum of the small intestine, we're going to enter into the large intestine. 2 major functions here. The big thing is to solidify the stool. So when stool is in the large intestine, when it first enters, it's very liquidy, but as it passes and travels through, water is going to get reabsorbed back into the body to make the stool more firm. And then this is also the location of the final elimination of waste, because the anus is part of the large intestine where food exits the body, waste exits the body. The 4 major parts, again, you want to know the order that these occur. The first part after the ileum of the small intestine is the cecum, just a small entryway really, and then we have the colon, which is the longest part, the rectum, and then the anus. The cecum, again, is the first portion. It contains the appendix, which is a small pouch that houses bacteria to help with digestion. The colon has 4 parts, the ascending, which goes up, transverse cuts across, descending goes down, and sigmoid is the S-shaped portion that connects to the rectum, the 6-inch muscular tube, and then the anus, the final entry point, which has 2 sphincters to help control the passage of stool out of the body.